Well, as the old cliche goes, start as you mean to go on. More on that in a moment, but first, hello and welcome along to Matchweek 2 predictions from the 24-25 EFL Championship season here at the Honest Football Podcast. The opening fixtures last weekend certainly caused a few shockwaves with some surprise results, some big scorelines, and of course some late drama and penalties into the equation too. But today we're going to move on to Match Week 2, which takes place this weekend, and give our score predictions and our reasons why for all 12 championship matches. You can do the same down in the comments below, and as always, if you beat or match my overall score, you will get a shout out in the recap next week when we look ahead to Match Week 3. But for now, let's have a quick recap of what we all predicted on the opening weekend, because I've managed to do something quite spectacular on the opening match day, and that is match my equal worst score for a full match day in the whole of last season. I only picked up 3 points in a weekend full of surprises. That was for a Sheffield United win, a Middlesbrough win, and a Sheffield Wednesday win. Those were my only 3 correct outcomes. And it's not just me who struggled this weekend, because on the opening match day, nobody reached double figures. That is normally what we do at the start of these videos, talked about how many people got 10 or more. Nobody did. The highest score was 8. But let me give a shout out to all of you who beat or matched my score, because most of us were pretty similarly matched. So level on 3 points with me, Darren, Steve and Chris, 3 of the regulars, all level on 3 points this weekend. On 4 with one more, it was Carl, Gordon, Swifty, Ojo, Tim, Mello and Bobby. Bobby did get 1 perfect score though for Stoke City's win. On 5 it was Mitchell, another regular, with a perfect score for Borough. BPK got 6 but no perfect scores. 6 with 1 perfect score apiece. Daniel and Simon, who both got Hull versus Bristol City correct, the Championship's favourite scoreline. Brian got Borough and 6 points, and FCH got 6 and Sunderland. Luke also got 6, he got the Stoke result right. But then we get to the top 2 this weekend. Jimmo on 7 with a perfect score for Sheffield United's win at managerless Preston now. And David B, top of the tree on 8, and you also got the perfect score for Sheffield United. Nobody got more than half of the outcomes right. It was an opening weekend with plenty of surprises. So is it going to be the same again this time around? Get your thoughts in the comment section as we move on to the opening game. Just one on Friday night this week. And I should give a quick caveat before we start to say that I'm recording this on Wednesday morning before the final 5 teams have been in EFL Cup action. So I can't base my judgment on those games. However, 2 teams we have already seen in EFL Cup action are Coventry and Oxford United. Coventry lost 1-0 at Stoke on the opening day of the season in what was a pretty low quality and low chances game. Only 3 shots on target across the whole match. 0-0 would not have been a surprise scoreline, but as it is, Coventry fell to defeat, which will be disappointing because they've so often been slow starters in recent years. But Coventry did bounce back in the week in the EFL Cup, and Ellis Sims got off the mark for the season, which all of your strikers getting a goal early can be very important. Again, another fairly even game there. Whereas for Oxford, on the other hand, it's been the perfect start. A brilliant performance in that 2-0 win against Norwich. I said it in the pre-season prediction show, I had to put them in the bottom 3 based on paper. But there's a big part of me that thinks they're going to do all right tactically this year. However, I do think they'll pick up most of their points at home. Norwich were appalling and they did a great job on them. They obviously beat Peterborough at home in the cup as well. Good to see Matt Phillips getting off the mark. But I do worry that away from home they might not be quite as strong. Early in the season, always hard to tell, but lovely to see them attacking teams, being aggressive, not just sitting and waiting while they adapt to the Championship, which we have seen in recent years with other teams. However, Coventry at home, generally a very hard side to beat. They are going to be strong this year once they get going. It's just how slow that start's going to be. I still don't think it's going to be anything too comprehensive this weekend. I think Oxford will be incredibly competitive this season. But I am going to go for Coventry to nick it, get that first win of the season at home. And I'm going to go for them to nick it on Friday night in a tight game by 2-1. Let's move on to Saturday, where there are 10 matches, including 3 early kickoffs thanks to the new Sky Sports Plus deal. Derby County versus Middlesbrough is the first of them. Now, Derby, I watched this game here on the podcast channel. Thank you so much to everyone who came in on the live stream. Against Blackburn, and they actually played pretty well. I'm probably more optimistic for them despite the defeat. I think the first half of the second half, they were absolutely magnificent. They got the equaliser through Curtis Nelson. And then maybe it was a little bit of naivety, either from Paul Warne or the coaching staff. They just went a bit too aggressive too soon. I think they saw that Blackburn were there for the taking. Ultimately, they left 3-on-3 at the back. And then obviously Blackburn timed that by bringing on Schmodix and Vyman and Ahashi, who made a big impact. And that unfortunately for Derby, they just got carved open. But I think there are a lot of positives there. And if they can play like that at home, I think they'll put teams under a lot of pressure. And I think they'll win a fair few games. They obviously won in the cup. Caden Jackson got a goal as well, which is going to be important moving forward. Whereas for Borough, obviously they haven't played the EFL Cup tie yet. I'm recording this before their trip to Leeds. I'm expecting a lot of rotation. But he did beat Swansea on the opening day. It was as comfortable a 1-0 win as you can get. They didn't have a lot of the ball, but they didn't have a shot on target against them. They had enough chances to win, I'd argue by 4 or 5. Missed a couple of very good opportunities. And it is the one thing I said. Can they get another regular goal scorer? Because Latif, he will score goals, but he's not as clinical or ruthless as an Akpom or an Archer that they've had in previous years. On the road, I think this game could be interesting. Based on what we saw from Derby, they're going to be vulnerable to the counter again. I think both sides could have spells in this match. I wouldn't be shocked if either wins it, but I'm going to go and sit on the fence. For the second game this weekend, I'm throwing in a Championship's favourite scoreline. 1-1 at Pride Park. On to the second of the early kickoffs, and it is between two teams that were 2 divisions apart last year. It is Portsmouth versus Luton Town. Both of them had difficult starts to the season defensively. Portsmouth, I'll be honest with you, I don't really know how they got a point out of that Leeds game. They were absolutely played off the park for the most part. Leeds hit the woodwork countless times. It was a fairly fortunate penalty in the end, but you've got to give Pompey credit. They were a threat on the break. They did adapt the way they played a bit from League One last season, but ultimately, that's one of the hardest games they're going to have all season, and he managed to get a point out of it. Callum Lang looked a real threat. At his best for Wigan, he had provided that in the past, so that is something that is incredibly positive. Not so positive was the 1-0 defeat at home to Millwall in the week. Not a great performance in the cup, no shot on target, a lot of the ball, and they did create a couple of good opportunities, but again, you're asking without Colby Bishop, who's going to put that ball in the net? Callum Lang might be the man in the league games, but have they got enough goal threats from enough sources? Of course, at home, it's going to be a very different thing in the league. They were great at home in their League One season last year, and a team that were great on the road in the Championship last time out were Luton Town. Down from the Premier League, facing one of their fellow relegated clubs, and absolutely battered by Burnley at home. A bit of a weird game for me, this, because we actually played all right in spells. We started well, and even though we conceded the first goal, we played okay for the first half an hour. And the first half of the second half, we were magnificent again. But so many injuries in defence. And in the end, every time Burnley just pumped a long ball forward, you felt like they were going to score. 4 fullbacks in defence, 2 academy kids in. Ultimately, we're going to look a different side after the September internationals when a few more are back. The biggest news of the week, of course, not football related for Luton. Tom Lockyer back in training for rehabilitation, which is absolutely brilliant as he continues his recovery. However, this game is going to be a battle of the 2 defences. Which one is the least susceptible? Portsmouth showed that they're incredibly vulnerable to a quick counter-attack against Leeds. Luton showed exactly the same against Burnley. And both teams have got the players to do that, particularly in wide areas. So I'm going to go for a high-scoring draw here. I could see either team nicking it again. I'm going to go for 2 goals apiece. But for me, I think of the early kickoffs, this will be the most exciting. I can't predict a Luton win. And the third and final early kickoff is the one that's on live TV between West Bromwich Albion and Leeds United. A game between 2 sides that will expect to be up in that top 6 mix this year. And I want to have a quick word about West Brom because we got a lot of stick from West Brom fans in the comments pre-season because we predicted them top 6. We said in Corberan we trust he'll find a way to get goals. And against QPR, he has unearthed the gem. Josh Maja finally looks like the wonder kid he was a few years ago. West Brom did what they do best. They were efficient. They scored goals when they created chances. They had a lot of the ball. They managed to suffocate QPR in that way a bit. And they had to defend well. But QPR did miss a couple of great chances. And it could have been a much closer game. However, we often say that about West Brom. The stats look even, but they keep winning. It's not luck if it happens most weeks. They'll be very disappointed with their efforts in the midweek away at Fleetwood. Obviously out of the League Cup. But there's not a huge amount of sides that are worried about that. Let's have a look at the Leeds game though. Because I know there was a little bit of panic from some of the Leeds fans after this. There was a big miss. There was 3 or 4 woodwork strikes. There was a dodgy penalty against. But I actually thought the Leeds performance was fantastic. Yes, defensively, there are a few areas that need to be sharpened and tightened up. However, if Leeds play like that all season, they will be going up very comfortably, in my opinion. And I'm still very confident they'll win the league based on that. There's part of me that wanted another Championship's favourite scoreline here, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go for West Brom to nick an ugly 1-0. I still don't think it's panic stations for Leeds yet. Let's move on to the 3 p.m. kickoff, starting at Ashton Gate with Bristol City versus Millwall. Bristol City, new season, new optimism, but same old problem. Conceding late goals is the Achilles heel of Bristol City. It has been for however many years we've been doing this. A 91st minute penalty after scoring fairly late themselves. But in truth, it wasn't a bad performance at all. They kept the ball pretty well. They created chances. However, they're still a little susceptible at the back. So I think that was a fair scoreline overall. Disappointment, of course, in the cup against Coventry, where they did create some chances again. But you're asking, where's that clinical edge going to be? And at times, it just hasn't been there for them. For Millwall, one of the most bizarre games of the opening weekend. I said there's no one who's predicting this to be the thriller. Ended up being one of the best games of the day. They worked so hard to get back from 2-0 down against Watford. Obviously conceding direct from a corner and a free kick. These things aren't going to happen every time. However, Duncan Watmore looked a threat, got himself a couple of goals, and then they managed to throw it away in the 90th minute. It will be infuriating for Neil Harris. But I think one of the positives to take out of that game is they played well. They created a number of clear-cut chances. I think they had 5 officially. So there were a number of signs that the attacking threat that I questioned is going to be there. But defensively, there were alarming signs there. Watford didn't do enough to win that game. Certainly didn't do enough to score 3. In the end, it was a bit of a gift. They did bounce back with the classic 1-0 win away from home at Portsmouth in the Cup. A game where they restricted them largely during the game, sat off, didn't have possession. A bit more what we saw from them towards the back end of last year. Millwall will still be fine this season for me, and I think a lot of people will go for a 1-1 draw in the comments. But I'm going to be bold in this one. I'm going to go for Bristol City to win. And I'm going to go surprisingly, perhaps, by 2-0. As we move on to the side that had a blistering start to the season on Monday night, it is Burnley versus Cardiff City. Burnley 4-1 winners at Luton. To be honest, we're seeing a big departure from Vincent Kompany ball there, aren't we? Very direct. Set pieces were a key factor as well. But they played the game perfectly against Luton. They sat back. They soaked up pressure. And yes, they had a few hairy moments at the back, but they dealt with it overall. And then on the break, they saw where Luton's weakness was. They didn't have any fit defenders. Let's get the ball down the channels quickly and hit on the break. Koleosho and Odebear, both like new signings, having spent a bit of last season injured. And while Dara O'Shea does appear to be looking like he's going to be moving to the Premier League Brentford, for now at least, it was a really good performance from him at the back. So plenty of positives from Burnley and Scott Parker on his opening night. For Cardiff, though, a very different weekend at home to Sunderland. Thought it was a really poor performance. Yes, the game was even overall in terms of stats, but they looked very vulnerable to the counter. They had a lot of possession without really carving Sunderland open a lot. And while they did create a couple of decent chances, it wasn't enough for a home performance against a side that was in a little bit of disarray, a couple of months ago at the end of last season. So concerns for Cardiff, I think, from that one, but I still think they'll get up to speed eventually. They did bounce back with that 2-0 win at home to Bristol Rovers in the Cup. Again, though, pretty hard to judge them on that game, but a much better performance at home. Away from home, it'll be interesting to see how they get on this year. But away at Burnley, I don't think it's going to be a particularly easy day. Burnley look threatening. I think they'll be more aggressive and more front-footed at home this season. And I think they're going to win this one pretty comfortably. They don't often keep clean sheets, Burnley, so I will have them to concede one. I'm going to go for them to get the victory here by 3-1 against Cardiff. Next up, we move on to a side that had a disastrous opening day. It is Norwich City, who play Blackburn Rovers at Carrow Road. Now, Norwich, I know, had a poor away record last year, relied on their home form to see them over the line. It looks already like that might be the case this year. The blow, of course, with Jonathan Rowe refusing to play on the morning, allegedly. But a 2-0 defeat at Oxford, a really poor performance. Certainly not what Thorpe would have been looking for in his first game in charge. They did bounce back in the week, but again, it wasn't that convincing. A 4-3 win at home to Stevenage in the Cup, and they gave up a few really poor opportunities in that game. So definitely cause for concern defensively. Haven't looked great in either of their matches. And the same should really be said for Blackburn against Derby last week. We watched the game in a live stream on Friday, and while they looked an incredible threat in the second half once Vyman, Ahashi and Schmodix run together, Ahashi looks a great find. Schmodix doing what he did best and then did it again in the Cup in the week. They came under considerable pressure from Derby, and a side with a bit more cutting edge at the top end of the table, maybe with someone like a Josh Sargent, might have put them away on another day. There was one instant from a corner where they just didn't defend well at all, and it's a miracle it didn't go in. So overall, you have to say a good win, real threat on the break, but defensively, again, causes for concern. I'm not sure it's going to be a comfortable season just based on that. Stockport played a bunch of kids. They battered them in midweek. So good confidence for John Eustace's side, and 10 goals from 2 games is brilliant. But both of these sides for me are a little vulnerable defensively. I think Norwich are going to be much stronger at home this year. Based on last season, they're going to have great home form. And Blackburn, while they've still got Schmodix and that counter-attacking threat at the minute, and Norwich aren't the best at the back, John Eustace's sides have generally been really poor on the road. So I'm going to go for Norwich to nick this one, just based on what I've seen from both over the last couple of years. And I'm going to go for Norwich to win narrowly by 2-1. But again, this is a game that could be high scoring. Let's move down to the southwest for 2 sides that I can't judge the Carabao Cup games of yet because they're both in action on Wednesday. It is Plymouth Argyle versus Hull City. And here, Plymouth fans, don't worry, it's safe. I won't be calling you Wayne Rooney's Plymouth Argyle, as Sky Sports will for the rest of the season. However, it was a pretty disastrous start to the season for Rooney and for Plymouth because a 4-0 defeat at Sheffield Wednesday, and I hate to say it, it didn't flatter them at all. It could have been more. I think officially they had 6 clear-cut chances, 5 expected goals, conceded over 30 shots, and it's what I said last week. When we went to the MK Plymouth friendly the week before, Plymouth was so vulnerable defensively against the League Two side. They were getting done in those channels between the fullback and centre-half. And they look really, really poor again. Sheffield Wednesday are a good side under Danny Roll. There's no shame in losing there. But the manner of the performance, the lack of attacking threat, to be honest, the lack of intensity and giving up from 2-0 was a little bit of a concern. And I mentioned this a little bit at the end of the game. The fact that coming in from last season, the first things they've done is replaced Ryan Hardy and Barley Mumba with players that look significantly inferior, in my opinion, is a little bit of a worry, I would say. It's nothing against the players coming in, but if they were 2 areas that Plymouth needed to improve, I think there were probably 6 or 7 other priorities. It's going to be a tough season for them, but home form is going to be crucial. And Hull City, under Tim Walter, if we know one thing about his teams, they're going to be pretty vulnerable defensively as well. Of course, they got that late goal to get the draw against Bristol City, which is important on the opening day, but not a hugely convincing performance. And as I mentioned in the pre-season, I do worry that they're maybe going to play more entertaining football this year, but possibly slide down the table from where they were with Liam Rosenior. So for this game, I'm predicting goals. I think both defences will be pretty poor. I think Hull City on the road will be leaky this year. Plymouth have got to go for it at home because away from home, they ain't picking up many points based on last week. So I'm going to go for a thriller. I'm going to go for Plymouth to be in it. I'm going to go Hull to win by 3-2 at Home Park. As we move back up north to Bramall Lane for Sheffield United versus QPR. It's been an excellent start to the season for Sheffield United, who beat a pretty hapless Preston on the opening day. Our Blaster, a player I mentioned pre-season, did really well towards the end of that Premier League year compared to most of a pretty struggling squad. They were efficient away at Preston. It wasn't a vintage performance. I expected it to be a scrappy game, and obviously it ended up being Ryan Lowe's final one. But Sheffield United did the job. They then beat Wrexham in a very different game in the Cup in midweek, but again, were professional and did their job while giving up a few poor chances defensively. For QPR, much the same problem. Who's going to put the ball in the back of the net? 3-1 defeat against West Brom, not the best defensively, but they created enough chances to get a couple of goals in that game. They didn't take clear-cut opportunities, and in the end, they left ruin missed chances, and that is something that was a catalyst for their struggle last season. So I'm hoping from their point of view, we'll either see an addition in attacking areas, or someone will come to the fore and put the ball in the net for them. I think QPR will make it tough at Bramall Lane. I don't think Sheffield United are just going to blitz them, but I am impressed with them early in the season, and I'm going to go for another home win. 2-1 is my scoreline. I just don't think QPR have shown the evidence that they're going to regularly take their chances yet. As we move on to the penultimate game from Saturday afternoon, it is Swansea City versus managerless Preston. 1 game in, and there's already a manager casualty. According to Peter Risdale, Ryan Lowe walked from Preston, having already tried to do so earlier in the summer. They were pretty poor at home to Sheffield United, making it 6 consecutive championship games without a goal over the end of last season and the start of this. And to be honest, I said pre-season I thought they'd struggle, and I guess depending on who comes in, that might well be the case this year. They did, though, play really well in the League Cup in midweek, got a 2-0 victory against Sunderland, were more aggressive, were more front-footed. Yes, played fairly directly, but there's no shame in that. They managed to get themselves a couple of goals and deservedly got through. For Swansea, a very difficult start at Borough. No shots on target, lots of the ball with no real purpose. And to be honest, it could have been 3, 4 or 5. If Borough had had a centre forward with their scoring boots on, that could have been an embarrassing scoreline too. They did bounce back against Gillingham in a cup, but again, not the best performance until Gillingham went down to 10. In the end, though, very comfortable win. Probably should have been 1 or 2 more. And they had nearly 80% of the ball. So it's, can you convert that possession into meaningful chances, meaningful territory? And I'm not sure for this one. I think Preston will set up without the ball. We know they're going to be in interim management this weekend. Neither side has really had much of a goal threat. Swansea couldn't manage a shot on target against Borough. Preston haven't scored in 6 league games. There's evidence this could be very different. I'm sure it'll end up being a thriller now based on Millwall Watford last week. I'm going to go for 0-0. Let's go bold early doors. And the final game on Saturday is Watford versus Stoke City. Two sides that have started the season with back-to-back wins. And for Stoke, back-to-back clean sheets under Steven Schumacher. Really good result against Coventry. I mentioned it was a low-quality game, but it doesn't matter that early on, does it? They gave up the ball, they nicked a goal, and they won the match, which is more important at this stage. For Watford, Tom Ince scored a hat-trick in a 5-0 win against MK Dons in a week. MK seemed to still be having a hangover of last year's playoffs, but Watford dominated the game, deserved to win convincingly. And last weekend, what a result against Plymouth. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of things here because, firstly, from 2-0 up, they gave away some really poor goals. Secondly, they're going to have to play better because you can't rely on a corner and a free kick every week. But one of the things we used to criticise Watford for is not having a fight when they went a goal down or things went against them. And they bounced back when it went to 2-2 and managed to find a winner. And that's something that previous Watford sides wouldn't have done. So credit on that front. But if you look at the chances and the clear-cut chances in particular for that game, Millwall on most other days would have won it. So Watford, promising signs in terms of the fighting spirit, but I'm not sure that performance is enough to convince me that they're going to have a great year. For this game, I really don't know what to go for because they're two sides that were incredibly inconsistent last year. They're two sides that take away Watford's start this time, don't generally score a lot of goals. So I think I'm going to have to sit on the fence. I'm going to finish Saturday as I started it with a Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. And that leaves just one game on Sunday lunchtime. It is Sunderland versus Sheffield Wednesday. Arguably two of the most impressive performers on the opening day of the Championship season. It was a 4-0 victory for Sheffield Wednesday at home to Plymouth. Of course, I'm recording before their midweek cup game. Plymouth were there for the taking. Plymouth were abysmal, and it took over half an hour to open them up. But once they did, Sheffield Wednesday looked great. They were playing some fantastic football. They were opening teams up, but they're going to come up against 22 tougher defences than that this season, in my opinion. For Sunderland, a really good result at Cardiff. Promising signs again. Jack Clark popping up with a goal. If they can keep hold of him, that would be massive. But then a 2-0 defeat at Preston in a week. Tough when they've just lost their manager, but a disappointing one for them because they're a side that would have liked to have had a cup run. However, nice to see them scoring again on the opening day, looking a little bit more of a threat. We know Sunderland at their best have got players that should be brilliant away from home, but what's it going to be like at home? Sheffield Wednesday managed to adapt a bit towards the end of last season. In fact, they played on the final day of last season, didn't they? Where Sheffield Wednesday won 2-0 at Sunderland. Are we going to see a repeat of that? I think we might see a similar style of game. I think Sheffield Wednesday are going to play to frustrate. They've got incredible quality on the counter. And I think whichever side of these plays away from home is going to be the favourite. So as a result, I'm going to go for 1-0 to Sheffield Wednesday. So with all of that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. Two teams to score 3 goals, those being Burnley at home to Cardiff and Hull away at Plymouth Argyle. I've gone for Sheffield United to continue their brilliant start at home to QPR, Burnley the same against Cardiff. And I've also gone for Norwich and Coventry to get their seasons up and running with home wins respectively in their matches. But those are just my predictions for match week 2. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions for this weekend's action. Don't forget, if you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out in the next recap, which will be next Wednesday, looking ahead to the weekend's action for match week 3. And to start that weekend off, we will be live on this channel watching Sheffield Wednesday versus Leeds next week Friday. So make sure you come and join us for that as well, because we had great fun here last Friday night. If you did enjoy this one though, do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with everything. If you missed our pre-season predictions, our tips for promotion, relegation and the playoffs, you can find them for all 3 EFL divisions and the National League up in the eye above. But thank you very much for watching. Good luck to your team this weekend, and I'll see you back here next Wednesday to look ahead to match week 3.